A soft light shone through the thin white curtains, the ocean breeze, and the sound of the Manhattan traffic wafting gently in. A vase of lavenders rested on a table beside it. A get-well-soon card from Canterlot, signed by 6 ponies back in Ponyville attached. The calendar told her it was the next day. Twilight groaned. Turning in the hospital bed, her wings felt like a sack of rocks inside the cast, and her entire body was more than sore otherwise. She heard a stirring next to her, and carefully turned her bandaged head to look. An alabaster mare with a shimmering mane had been sitting on a pillow nearby. She set her book aside, her broad wings shuffling at her sides as she stood, the sun glinting off the golden crown which sat behind her horn.
"Twilight,"
Princess Celestia said, a small half-smile forming on her face.
"you gave us all quite the scare back there."
Princess Celestia?
She squirmed a bit, grunting against the pain.
"Spike! Where's Spike? Is he okay?" "Spike's fine.
Celestia gently pushed her back down.
He's resting in the other room. The 2 of you will be coming back to Canterlot with me on the next train." The Mare In White. I saw her. She's real."
Celestia nodded sadly.
"I had suspected as much. You see, I'd never been able to find her. I knew her madness was dangerous, but I thought that perhaps you might draw her out. That was why I didn't tell you about her. I wanted you to investigate with an open mind."
She sighed, sitting down on her haunches next to the bed, laying a hoof over the foreleg of her former student.
"Obviously, despite my age, my judgment can still be poor, and I'm sorry for that."
Twilight looked away, not sure how to respond. Finally, she asked the question which pressed most on her mind.
Who was she? When she was alive, I mean.
Princess Celestia sighed, a deep pain centuries old, weighing down on her as she closed her eyes.
She is one of my greatest regrets.
Strong hooves touched down softly against the grass. A cloaked figure tucking its wings, glancing over the edge, taking a moment to look out over the ocean view. The moon sparkled against the ocean like a second set of stars, as if there was no horizon, and heaven and earth had become one. Slowly, the tall and slender pony turned away, stepping towards the ruin of a familiar place. It had once been a major guard post, flaunted as an essential tactical asset during some now irrelevant war. Fought by ponies even she couldn't quite remember, and had become completely disused over centuries, lying now as little more than rubble, a fraction of what it used to be. A hoof came up to push the hood back as the pony surveyed the ruin. One might have thought her a stallion, from her muscular build and near hulky sway of her shoulders, if not for the soft features of her face, impervious to time, hardened only by loss. Tenderly she climbed the steps, treating the pile of rubble with the reverence of a sacred shrine to something long forgotten, placing a hoof against the stone where a grand door once stood. Now, even the metal of it had rusted away to dust and had been lost to that calm ocean breeze. Her nostrils flared as she took in a breath, allowing the smell of salt and sand churning far below to wash through her as she stood, lost in ancient memories. Behind her, she felt a stirring. She turned and saw her, the Mare in White. She looked at her without fear, without anger, or even worry. And when she spoke, the only tremor in her voice was the ache of melancholy.
"I heardest thou might be here. I never left. This I can see. I waited for you."
The visitor paused, closing her eyes.
"I know. I was expelled from the guard as soon as you were gone.
I know. They called me the Night Witch. They accused me of murdering foals and consuming their flesh. I read the stories. They tried to kill me, but, as you said, you know.
The living mare stood silently, looking down at the echo of the one who was gone.
When I ran, they chased me. Everywhere I tried to hide, I was soon found out. They made me live as if I were a ghost, with no place I could truly live, no shelter for my so-called sins.
The mare put her icy hoof against the worn stone.
This was the last place I came to, the only safe place I could think of. Our old secret. Our secret.
The visitor smiled bitterly.
A funny way to describe your former post. Then again, you were the only caretaker to truly appreciate its beauty. But, in time, the loneliness became too great for me to bear. After all, we were the only ponies to come here in the end, weren't we, Princess? I suppose so. It gave me time to brood, just angry, hating, wallowing in my despair. But other times, I imagined what could have been, what would have been in a world where our love wasn't looked down upon, a world where I could have you, a world where you were still here.
The living mare closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, finding the air cold and crisp, like that of a calm winter's day.
I remembered our secret liaison here. When we were wed, the lavenders you hung were beautiful under the light of your moon, as were the candles I lit. You were wearing that uniform you were so proud in. I was wearing a beautiful white dress. We spoke our vows, with the sea at our backs. The lonely guardhouse our only witness. You held me, and I held you. And in that kiss, I thought we shared a love that would never be broken.
The princess opened her eyes, looking down at her with woe, reaching out to touch her face with a stilled hoof. The mare turned away before she could, stepping down the stairs heading towards the cliff.
And when the memory was not enough, I imagined what it would be like if our love hadn't been so taboo. If you were not a princess, and I were not your guard. If ponies like us, if the love between mares was not looked down upon as it was, I imagined your sister was there in Pony.
Her voice cracked ever so slightly, a final pang of bitterness.
As if she could ever approve what we had. I imagined my whole family was there, not in shame of their wayward daughter, but in joy for our matrimony.
The princess only stared, having stopped a few paces short of her, following her gaze out to the ocean.
And when I couldn't take it anymore, couldn't live with it,
the mare stated coldly over the edge, giving a gentle shrug of defeat.
I just wanted that view, our view, to be the last thing I ever saw. And that memory of that ending, which never was, to be the last I ever remembered. I'm sorry.
The princess grit her teeth, holding back tears.
I'm so sorry, my dear sweet Serenity. What's done is done.
The echo of Serenity stated solemnly.
I stood for something that could never be, and this is where I fell.
The princess stepped beside her, staring out over the jagged rocks below.
After that, I was but a force of nature.
She finished.
A lingering rage, left to wander these woods in agony, haunted by my own despair, until the day one who was pure of heart could lay me to rest.
Her lover draped a wing over her withers, as if unsure what she might do to make up for so much time lost with the shadow of her former love. They stood there for a moment, but there was no warmth, for all warmth had left the mare far too long ago to ever be regained.
The sun will be rising soon. I think I should like to watch it with you. One last time. suppose it was wishful thinking to believe I might be able to bring some part of you back.
The mare shook her head.
Who I was died long ago. My anger, my loss, my heartache. Pain was all that remained of what I was.
She glanced upwards.
And now that the pain is gone, all that's left is a fading memory. It is a bittersweet one.
The princess responded. The mare nodded.
It is one that I'm sure you will keep forever. In truth, I was never really Serenity, only the wave left behind by her grief, simply overtaking whatever tried to swim in front of me. Without care, or even consciousness of what they were, until finally, I found a shore soft enough to break upon.
She glanced up at the princess.
That mare, the one with the dragon, what was her name? Twilight Sparkle.
The princess responded.
I see. Her heart is quite pure. Indeed.
She nodded.
This is by no means the first time she has helped me, and it will likely not be the last. Do you have feelings for her?
The princess hesitated.
Perhaps, though most of them lie in the awful things she has delivered me from.
She closed her eyes.
Her soul is more beautiful than any I have ever known. As old as I am, I know not what I should do. You should cherish her.
The mare quietly advised.
Let my fate be a reminder that, no matter how you choose to act, you should cherish her for the wonder that she is.
They gazed out at the moonlit sea, the stars shimmering as if their eyes and tears were forming within them. They hung like the condemned, so far above the endless expanse of dark waves that none could touch them. Stretching beyond that horizon, where the worlds of water and sky were melted into one. In their imaginations, they searched for a place far beyond there, where they would ever find the happiness they had once had when their bodies had intertwined and their hearts had been one. None could be found. They were only the fleeting moments of the now. Soon, the top silver of the sun appeared, shimmering over top the clear blue horizon, splitting sky and sea. Serenity took a deep breath as her pale form shimmered in the sunlight, and for a brief moment, the blue color of her coat seemed to return, her eyes sparkling a green as deep as the forest behind them, as if, for an instant, she was alive once more. Her lover looked down at her, staring deep, knowing this moment would be the last she ever saw of her. She leaned forward, murmuring the words her ancient heart lent her.
Thou art more beautiful than life itself, my love.
The mare looked up into her eyes, her own sparkling like gems, as if they were lost in each other.
Thou art an angel, a miracle of beauty in the darkness of night.
Their lips met, the warmth of life pressing against the cold of death, as they shared their final kiss. In a moment, they tried in vain to make up for a millennia of separation. 1,000 years of death, 1,000 years of loneliness. The princess let go, eyes still closed, uttering forth a promise in barely a whisper.
For as long as I live, should it be an eternity, I swear I shall never forget you.
She opened her eyes and found herself alone, standing in the first warmth of the morning sun. The only sound in that silence was the calming rushing of the waves against the rocks below. Serenity was at rest. Her long-lost love was finally departed. Lumina laid her head down on the grassy ground, and she wept.